The Zirathai marketplace smelled of cold metal, rusted cages, and fear, an odor Lyra had lived with for so long that it had become part of her breathing. Blind since birth, she could not see the shadows slithering around her, but she could feel them. Her antennae picked up every vibration, each carrying the sharp taste of greed, cruelty, or indifference. Tonight, those vibrations trembled with something worse: betrayal. Vorak, her bondmate by arrangement and captor by reality, stood a few paces away negotiating in the guttural tongue of off-world traffickers. Lyra sensed the irregular pulse in his voice, a mixture of desperation and impatience. She did not need eyes to understand that he was selling her. He had never wanted a blind mate, only the small social elevation that came with possessing one. When her inability to perform certain tasks embarrassed him among his peers, he punished her in ways quiet enough for the neighbors not to hear. Lyra had endured it with the silent resignation common to many females in her caste. She had never imagined there could be another path. Tonight, however, the vibrations in the floor told her that her life was about to change, not by choice, but by force. A heavy hand seized her arm, and she flinched despite trying not to. The trafficker's touch was cold, clinical, devoid of even the contempt Vorak used to show. This was the touch of someone handling merchandise, nothing more. Lyra swallowed back a trembling breath as she was guided toward the auction platform. The murmurs around her swelled, each voice a needle of curiosity or hunger. She stood still, spine rigid, antennae curled inward in fearful instinct. If she could have folded herself into nothingness, she would have. One of the traders recited the details of her condition: blind, timid, obedient, low maintenance. A list of traits delivered with the same tone one would use for livestock. Lyra bit the inside of her cheek to keep from reacting. She had learned long ago that emotional expression only invited harsher treatment. But inside, a quiet flame of despair flickered. Even for a Zirathai female, being sold meant losing every remaining scrap of identity. Vorak remained silent behind her, arms crossed. She could feel his annoyance, not guilt. Selling her was simply a way to erase his debts, nothing more. The crowd's attention shifted as bidders from various species began calling out numbers in rough accents. Lyra caught fragments of their intentions: workers, experiments, entertainment. Each possibility felt like a chain tightening around her throat. She did not dare imagine what awaited her. A sudden crackle disrupted the air, followed by a sharp vibration that ran through the metal platform. The auction hall's lighting flickered. Voices grew irritated. Lyra tilted her head, sensing someone different approaching the platform. The emotional tone was unfamiliar, warmer, softer, tinged with concern instead of predation. She could not place it. The footsteps were lighter, uneven in rhythm, and accompanied by the faint hum of human machinery. She had heard of humans, their strange empathy, their unpredictable kindness, but she had never encountered one. The newcomer murmured something to the auctioneer. His voice was low, gentle, but firm in a way Lyra was unaccustomed to. The crowd murmured in annoyance when the bidding suddenly stopped. The auctioneer announced that a new buyer had made a final offer, one far higher than anyone expected for a blind alien female. The room buzzed with outrage, but the transaction was irreversible. Vorak's vibrations spiked in irritation. He had wanted quick money, not a complicated exchange, but the amount offered silenced any objections he might have had. Without ceremony, he turned away. That casual abandonment pierced Lyra harder than any physical strike ever had. She felt herself being guided down the stairs toward the stranger. Every instinct screamed danger, but the emotional aura surrounding him remained warm, unexpectedly steady. When his hand brushed hers, she tensed violently. She prepared for the usual harsh grip, but instead, the contact was feather-light, almost hesitant. He withdrew quickly, as though afraid to startle her further, and spoke in a calm voice shaped by soft consonants. She couldn't decipher the words, but the tone alone soothed her trembling nerves. No one had ever spoken to her like that. He offered his arm instead of taking hers by force. When she hesitated, he waited, not dragging, not urging, waiting, as though her choice mattered. Lyra did not know how to respond to such unfamiliar gentleness. But the auction hall behind her pulsed with predatory attention, and instinct pushed her forward. She reached out, fingertips brushing the fabric of his sleeve. His heartbeat vibrated through it, steady, strong, unthreatening. As they moved away from the platform, Lyra sensed other vibrations fading behind them, the eyes of the crowd losing interest now that the spectacle had ended. She allowed herself to be led down a quieter corridor, her breathing slowly steadying. Each step away from Vorik, from the cages, from the whispered cruelties, felt unreal. When the door closed behind them and the noise of the market dulled, Lyra exhaled a long, shaky breath. A strange feeling flickered across her chest, something that was not fear, though fear still lingered beneath it. It was the sense that perhaps, just perhaps, her life had not ended tonight. It had shifted, sharply, violently, but not necessarily toward something worse. She stood still, feeling the gentle presence beside her. This human had bought her, but for reasons she could not understand. Her entire life had taught her that ownership meant pain. And yet, everything about him contradicted that expectation. She did not know his name, his intentions, or his world. But she knew one truth with startling clarity: the vibrations around him carried no cruelty. For the first time in years, Lyra felt a fragile spark, something like hope, but too new to trust. She turned her head toward him, antennae trembling as she sensed his steady calm. Whatever came next, the darkness she had known all her life no longer felt so suffocating. The stranger's presence had carved a small opening in it, a sliver of possibility she did not dare to name. Under the dim glow of the refugee outpost's perimeter lights, Kale moved with an ease that contrasted sharply with Lyriena's trembling uncertainty. He didn't rush her. Every step he took, he announced softly, letting her triangulate his location. Her world was nothing but gradients of shadow and empty space, yet somehow, his presence gave that darkness a shape she could trust. When he offered his hand again, she hesitated only long enough to remember the last time someone had grasped her. Rough fingers, anger, and the snap of a trade contract she hadn't understood. This hand was different. Warm, patient, and waiting. She followed the warmth. Kale guided her to a quiet corner beside a humming generator. "Sit. Only if you want," he said, the cave-soft timbre of his voice brushing the edges of her fear. She folded her legs beneath her, listening to him settle across from her. Her species, the Zevrian, communicated through touch far more deeply than words. Touch revealed mood, truth, intent. But she had never experienced a touch that didn't hide something poisonous beneath it. Even from her husband. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Kale murmured. She almost laughed. Everyone said that before they revealed why she should have been terrified. Instead of forcing reassurance, he simply placed his hand near hers, not touching, just close enough that she felt the heat seeping toward her. "If you need to know who I am, you can check." He said it awkwardly, unsure if he was offering correctly. She tilted her head, startled that a human knew of Zevrian tactile truth-reading. Slowly, Lyriena extended her fingers and touched him. The moment their skin met, her senses sharpened like a blade being honed. Through the delicate membranes of her fingertips, she tasted his emotional landscape. Humans were noisy beings, bright and volatile. But Kale was steady, like the warmth of a hearth after a long winter march. Concern pulsed through him. Protective instinct. No deceit. No hunger for ownership. Just a quiet man who had seen too much suffering and refused to add to it. She jerked back, overwhelmed not by danger, but by honesty. "You are different," she whispered. He chuckled softly. "You mean clumsy. Humans aren't great at first impressions." "No," she said, her voice quivering. "You feel like someone who remembers what pain does." His breath hitched faintly. She sensed sorrow ripple through him, tightly controlled but impossibly deep, like a wound old enough to scar but not old enough to forget. She didn't press. He didn't ask how she could feel it. Some mutual understanding formed between them, fragile and unnamed. Then the outpost alarm blared in the distance, a metallic scream slicing through the moment. Lyrina's body locked in terror. That sound meant danger, meant her husband's long reach, meant the network of traffickers who had taken her. She backed into the wall, trembling as though the concrete itself was shifting beneath her hands. Cale reached out, not to grab, not to pull, but to anchor. He let his hand hover until she inched toward it, desperate for something sure. She clutched his fingers, her grip shaking. "It's just a supply check," he explained quietly. "Nothing to fear." "You don't understand," she stammered. "He will find me. He always finds what he thinks he owns." Cale's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of anger. She read the shift in the air around him. Not anger toward her. Anger for her. "No one owns you, Lyrina," he said. "Not anymore." She wanted to believe that. The idea was as foreign to her as sunlight she could not see. Freedom was a scent she'd never tasted, a shape her fingers had never brushed. But Cale spoke it like a promise forged from something stronger than hope. He stood and extended his hand again. "Come on. Let's get you somewhere safer. You don't have to walk alone." This time, she didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his, feeling the way he adjusted his pace to match hers, how he shifted obstacles out of the way without making her feel helpless. He treated her blindness not as a flaw, but as a simple fact of her being, like hair color or height. Something natural. Something she didn't need to apologize for. With every step beside him, her fear loosened, thread by trembling thread, replaced by a fragile trust she had never known with any creature, human or Zevrian. But beneath that new warmth, another truth hummed in the dark. Her husband was out there, furious, humiliated, and hunting. And Cale, without knowing it, had just placed himself directly in the creature's path. The night around them grew colder, but Lyrina felt warmth for the first time, not from lights, not from safety, but from the gentle human holding her hand, unknowingly stepping into a storm built from betrayal, ownership, and a bond her former husband would kill to reclaim. The desert winds of Zirian's outer moons were shifting again, carrying with them a warning that Cale felt before he understood. Lyrina sensed it too, not through sight, but through the subtle tremors in the air, the way the molecules vibrated in patterns familiar to her. Her species could feel pursuit long before it arrived. And tonight, every sound carried a tension sharp enough to bruise. They had been moving between safe stations for days, Cale guiding her through rugged terrain while trying to remain invisible to anyone searching for her. The more he protected her, the more she feared for him. She had escaped at the cost of her husband's pride, and for a Zevrian male, pride was blood-deep and sacred. Losing ownership of his bondmate, even one he considered defective, was an insult no male of his caste would allow to stand. Lyrina could sense her husband's fury echo through the networks she'd once been trapped under. Whispers, bounties, promises of violence. Cale wasn't just shielding her from a cruel life. He was now standing against a man bred for conquest. "Cale," she whispered softly, her fingers sliding up his arm. "He is closer. I feel echoes." Cale slowed their pace. He didn't ask how she knew. He never questioned her instincts. "How far?" She concentrated, touching the stone beneath her feet. Not to read it, but to sense its vibrations. A faint rhythmic distortion pulsed through it, a hovering engine, low and predatory. A transport craft. Heavy, not local. He is hunting. Cale cursed under his breath. "Then we need to move faster." "No," she said, clutching his sleeve. "He's not searching. He is tracking. It means someone saw us." Someone spoke. Cale's breath stiffened. Then his voice dropped to a hard, protective whisper she was coming to recognize. "Let him come. I'm not giving you back." Her throat tightened. She had never been worth defending before. She had never been worth anything. At least, not to those who saw her blindness as a flaw. Her husband had purchased her young, hoping her tactile sensitivity would mature into a useful skill. When it didn't, she became a burden. Then a commodity. Then expendable. But Cale treated her as though she were something sacred. They reached an abandoned comms bunker buried in the dunes. Kale checked the perimeter, scanned for trackers, then guided her inside. The walls hummed faintly, creating a soundscape she could interpret like a map. She walked with more confidence here, tracing her fingers along old metal panels. Kale watched her navigate quietly, admiration softening his normally guarded expression. "You're getting better at walking without assistance." She paused, turning her face toward the warmth of his presence. "You make the world feel understandable." He opened his mouth to speak, but the ground vibrated. Heavy, mechanical, coming closer. Lyriena's heartbeat spiked. "Kale." "I hear it." He grabbed the small blaster from his pack and positioned himself between her and the bunker's entrance. "Stay behind me." "No." Her voice cracked with urgency. "You cannot fight him. My husband is not human. He sees humans as fragile, breakable. He will not talk, he will not hesitate. Then he'll learn what happens when he threatens someone under my care." The craft landed with a thunderous impact, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Lyriena clutched Kale's arm, her fear trembling through her fingers. She tried to form words, warnings, anything, but the metallic hiss of opening doors silenced her. Her husband's voice echoed through the bunker, deep and resonant, dripping with contempt. "Lyriena, come out. Now." Her breath froze. Kale stepped forward, refusing to yield even a single inch. "She's not going anywhere with you." A low, mocking laugh shook the bunker walls. "A human," her husband sneered. "This fragile creature thinks he can protect what is mine?" "I'm not yours," Lyriena whispered, barely audible, but Kale heard it, and the whisper filled him with a fire he didn't know he had. He tightened his grip on the blaster. "She doesn't belong to you. She chooses where she goes." Her husband's presence moved like a shadow stretching across space. She couldn't see him, but she felt him, like a storm of sharp edges. She cannot choose. She is blind, broken. A defective Zevrian does not choose anything. Kale's voice darkened, quiet but powerful. "She sees more than you ever have." The silence that followed crackled with threat. Then metal screeched as her husband tore part of the bunker's entrance aside with raw strength. Heavy footsteps approached, vibrating through the floor. Kale shifted his stance, placing himself fully in front of Lyriena. He was outmatched. Lyriena knew it. Her species was built for war. Humans were built for endurance, resilience. But Kale stood as though he'd been waiting his whole life to face someone like this. "Move," her husband growled, "or I will break you." Kale lifted his chin. "Try." Before the attack could come, Lyriena moved. She reached out, her fingertips brushing Kale's back, sending him a single whispered truth through touch. "He is stronger. But you are not alone." For the first time in her life, she wasn't the weak one needing rescue. She wasn't the one dragged, sold, or silenced. She felt something rise within her. Not courage, not yet, but the beginning of it. A spark flickering in the darkness she had always lived in. Her husband's fury swelled, ready to strike. Kale braced. And Lyriena stepped forward, choosing, for the first time, who she would stand beside. The storm had arrived, and everything they had begun to build was about to be tested in the fire of one man's obsession and another's unexpected bravery. The air inside the shattered bunker tasted of metal and fear. Lyriena stood between two worlds, the one that had owned her and the one she had barely begun to understand. Her husband's fury radiated like a heat wave, filling the space with the heavy thrum of a predator ready to strike. Kale stood firm in front of her, blaster raised, breath steady despite the danger towering before him. He should have been terrified. He probably was. But he never let her feel it. Her husband advanced with slow, deliberate steps, each one thudding like a warning drum through the floor. "Step aside, human," he snarled. "She returns with me." "No," Lyriena whispered before Kale could answer. She moved closer, placing her hand gently on Kale's back. Her species spoke truths through touch, and she needed him to feel hers. A swirl of fear, trust, and something new, Hope flowed from her fingertips into him. Cale exhaled, the tremor in his shoulders steadying. He shifted to shield her more fully. She said no. Her husband bared his teeth, a guttural sound rumbling from his throat. She is blind. She only echoes what she hears. His contempt lashed the air like a whip. You presume her capable of choice. Cale didn't look away. She chose to walk beside me. Lyriina felt her husband's rage snap, a violent surge in the space around them. No more warnings. No more words. He lunged. Cale fired. The blaster charge hit her husband's shoulder, slowing but not stopping him. Zevrian warriors were bred to withstand far worse. The creature crashed into Cale with brutal force, sending him skidding across the bunker floor. Lyriina cried out and stumbled forward, reaching blindly for the sound of impact. Cale groaned but pushed himself up, coughing through pain. I'm okay, he rasped, even though he clearly wasn't. His ribs ached, breath uneven. He raised the blaster again. Her husband stalked toward him. You dare protect what is mine? Lyriina's heart pounded. She had been raised to obey, not to fight. To stay silent in the presence of males. To accept that she was lesser because her world was always dark. But Cale had shown her a different life, one where darkness didn't mean helplessness. One where a gentle voice could say her name without owning it. One where her touch wasn't something to exploit. And she would not let that life be taken away. She stepped between the two men. Cale froze. Lyriina, don't. Her husband snarled. Move. His command hit her mind like a blow. Old instinct screamed. Obey, submit, fold. But she didn't move. She lifted her chin toward the sound of his raging breath. You sold me. You lied about me. You hurt me. You are mine, he growled. A bond mate obeys. No, she said quietly. A bond mate chooses. He struck, not with claws, but with the psychic force Zevrian males used to dominate. It crashed against her mind, but it didn't claim her. Something blocked it. Cale. He had stepped behind her, his hand gripping her shoulder, grounding her, sharing strength through touch even though he didn't understand how Zevrian mind commands worked. His presence burned like a warm anchor in her darkness. Her husband reeled back, startled that the attack didn't work. Impossible. She is blind. She cannot resist. Lyriina's breath shook, but her voice held. I can if someone believes I can. Her husband roared and lunged again, but this time, Cale moved with practiced human precision. He dropped low, sidestepped, and fired point-blank into the weakened shoulder. The blast tore through muscle and armor-plate skin. Her husband crashed to the ground, howling. Not dead, but defeated. Panting, Cale lowered the blaster and reached instinctively for Lyriina. She turned toward the sound of his breathing, her hands trembling as they found his chest, shoulders, face, mapping the extent of his injuries through gentle sweeps. Relief flooded her at the familiar warmth of him. You're hurt, she whispered. I'll live, he managed. Her husband's ragged breath filled the bunker. He will abandon you, he hissed. Humans always leave. Lyriina knelt, turning her face toward the fading threat. Better to be left than owned. Her husband growled weakly, but the fight was gone. The craft he arrived in beeped with an emergency recall. The built-in safeguards activated, dragging his failing body toward evacuation. As the ship lifted off, vanishing into the hazy sky, silence settled over the bunker. Cale leaned against the wall, exhausted. Lyriina crawled to sit beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his jaw, searching for expression she could not see. His smile brushed beneath her fingertips, tired, aching, but real. You chose to stand with me, Cale murmured. I chose freedom, she said softly. Her hand slid down his arm, curling around his wrist. And I chose the one who showed me how it feels. Cale's fingers threaded through hers. She could feel the warmth, the steady promise he didn't put into words. He didn't need to. His touch spoke clearly enough, gentle, steady, protective. A language she understood better than sight. Outside, the winds shifted again, no longer carrying danger, only the scent of open worlds and uncharted paths. For the first time, Lyriina didn't feel lost in the dark, because she wasn't walking into it alone. And though their future was uncertain, she felt the spark inside her glow brighter, warmed by the human who had given her something her own people never had.